Welcome to the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in critical times. Here's your host, Bill Kelly.
Welcome to another edition of the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in these critical times. I am your host, Bill Kelly. Good to have you with us today. As we wind down 2025, we have an international threat that we need to be paying attention to. I know we're busy doing other things. Just about everybody in the world is these days for the holiday season. But the story that came out of Washington yesterday, that Donald Trump has once again revived his interest, his obsession, some might say, with Greenland, is something to be taken seriously. I know that it's easy for some people to simply say, oh, it's just he's a crazy guy and he's just ranting and raving. No big deal. It is a big deal. So much so that I think we need to spend a lot more time talking about this. The leaders of both Denmark and Greenland have insisted now that the United States will not take over Greenland and demanded respect for territorial integrity. This is after Donald Trump, of course, announced the appointment of a special envoy to the semi-autonomous territory of Greenland. Now, just for the history of this, and so you understand the significance of this, Greenland is a territory of Denmark, okay? They do have their own, they are self-governing, they have their own government, their own president, etc., but it is a territory, not unlike Puerto Rico is for the United States, like Hawaii was at one point, and I guess Alaska was to a certain extent as well. It's a protectorate, it's part of their nation, and Trump doesn't recognize that. Trump doesn't recognize a whole lot of anything when it comes to any other people's sovereignty, but this is real. And as we talked about, this is months ago now on the podcast, the reason that Trump is so fascinated with this, of course, is he says it's for military strategy and to protect the Arctic, etc. And that there is an element of truth to that. But it's minerals. It's all about minerals. And basically what the United States is looking for are places to mine the things that they're going to need for future manufacturing. And they don't want to buy them. They don't want to trade for them. They simply want to take them over, which is one of the reasons why he's eyeing Greenland. And by the way, another one of the reasons why he is obsessed with Canada too. It's about mineral rights and water. It's the way Trump thinks, the way he acts. He doesn't think any of the rules apply to him. And this is a scary proposition right now. As a matter of fact, even the day he made the announcement, it was kind of a secondary element to his announcement. Because he announced that he was going to actually commission and pay for, with American taxpayer money, of course, a whole band of new battleships that were going to be named after him, of course, right? Anything that Trump does has to have his name on it, notwithstanding the fact that military experts have already said that battleships are obsolete now. Aircraft carriers and drones and other things are used right now. As a matter of fact, I think it was about 25 years ago that the United States pretty much decommissioned all their battleships. But that wouldn't stop Trump. And by the way, isn't it fascinating that a guy who, got out and got daddy to write notes and bribed a few doctors to write notes so he could, get out of the draft, and this happened 3 or 4 times, who called people that served in the military suckers and losers, but he has no problem telling those suckers and losers to go and do his military dirty work for him, whether it's, blowing up ships in the South Atlantic or wherever the case might be. And he seems to be indicating this, too, because he even mentioned that he is not ruling out military action to take over Greenland. That's pretty frightening. And 9 months ago, we might have laughed at that and said, oh, come on, he's not really going to do that. The way things have gone and the way he's acted over the last 9 months, you can't discount that at this stage, and that's pretty frightening. So Denmark is responding to this, as you might expect. Certainly Greenland is, too. But I'm concerned, frankly, that there hasn't been a really large hue and cry from the rest of the world. Bob Ray, who is the former Canadian ambassador to the United Nations, was on SubStack just the other day, and he said the U.S. claim to Greenland has no legal or historic justification, none whatsoever. By announcing the plan, the U.S. gives comfort to every illegal annexation in the world. We are living in a new era, the anarchy, the autocracy, and the kleptocracy. The silence out there is deafening. Please speak the words. That's from Ambassador Bob Ray. And he raises a very legitimate point. If there is no outcry, then Trump's simply going to wait and say, well, what the hell? Nobody's going to stop me. Nobody's going to speak out against this. Let's just roll in there. He's stealing, basically, it's the Vladimir Putin playbook, isn't it? Putin just decides, okay, we want Crimea back. Bingo, and he goes. and of course with Ukraine. And well, we've even seen what's going on with Ukraine now, that, the quote-unquote Trump peace plan for Ukraine is really Putin's peace plan to give up large chunks of Ukraine to Russia and basically turn your back. And we saw this happen. I know the old adage, if you don't learn from history, you're bound to repeat it. This is what happened in the 1930s when Hitler started moving across Europe. And Neville Chamberlain, but other leaders, too, were complicit in this, saying, okay, all right, enough of that. You can take Poland and Czechoslovakia, but that's it. No more. We're going to get angry at you if you keep doing that. And, of course, Hitler just said, to hell with you guys, and kept on going until they basically pushed the British troops into the English Channel in 1942. Pretty frightening stuff. Now, I'm not suggesting there's going to be a large military action as far as the United States is concerned, but if you're living in Denmark right now, or more importantly, if you're living in Greenland, you're worried, and you have every right to be worried about what's going on, and because this is Trump, and Trump doesn't think that any boundaries apply to him in these situations. The Danish foreign minister has responded immediately, as you might expect. They're going to summon the United States ambassador to the ministry in response. Now, this is a diplomatic a way of saying, hey, what the hell do you guys think you're doing? To bring the ambassador in and say, explain yourself. Well, and of course, the ambassador is simply going to, echo whatever the administration, in this case, Trump's administration, is saying to them. They get their talking points. That he's the boss as far as that goes. And we've seen how ambassadors act under Trump. We've got one of them here in Canada right now that is just another Trump mouthpiece. But anyway, their point is well taken. They have gone on record now saying, we've said it before, we say it again, national borders and the sovereignty of states are rooted in international law. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said that. And her green part, of course, from the president of that particular land, Jean Frederick Nielsen, says in a joint statement, these are fundamental principles, they went on to say. You cannot annex another country, even with the argument about international security, because that's what Trump keeps talking about here. And they're simply saying, back off. You have no territorial right to this. Now, there is a point, as we mentioned a second ago, about military strategy. And we know that the Arctic, because of the mineral content there, the precious minerals, a lot of people are eyeing this. We in Canada claim a good deal of land up there as ours. Nobody's ever given us much of a hassle about that in the past, but that's changing because China and other countries, the United States certainly, Russia, and others are now looking at the Arctic and saying, hey, we want a slice of that pie because we could use those minerals as well. And they are all in there in various iterations right now. And Canada needs to be worried about that. So our northern defenses here is something that's very, very important to us. And Prime Minister Carney has talked about this. He's been up there a couple of times, of course, on visits as Prime Minister, I think, to underscore the need for that. But Trump is looking at this and looking at Greenland as a strategic piece, not just for military action, which, by the way, they're allowed to do anyway. They are a NATO nation. They say we want to increase the military presence there. But I find it laughable, really, that one of the justifications that Trump has always used for this is, well, we need this for national security because of the threat of Russia and China. Trump licks Putin's boots wherever he can, whenever he can. So don't tell me on one hand that he's willing to let Putin do whatever he wants, say whatever he wants, and take whatever he wants, and at the same time say, well, we've got to stand strong against Putin. There's a certain hypocrisy there that I think really needs to be brought out and I think underscored here. The old idea that Trump can say whatever he wants, but it's look at his actions or his non-actions, I guess, in particular cases like this. But what we want to talk about here, and what I think former Ambassador Bob Ray was hinting at, is you can't let this go on. Because the longer it goes, the more it festers, the more difficult it's going to be to find some sort of a solution to this. And this is what happened, of course, in the Baltics, and obviously with the Crimea, is everybody knew what Putin wanted to do. He was quite vocal about that. Everybody was concerned when there were troop movements by the border. Remember those stories? Well, they're just military operations. They're training exercises. Nothing really going on here. Don't pay attention to that. Don't look here. And then bingo, the next thing you know, they're invading. Same thing happened with Ukraine. And the United States is basically appearing to use the same strategy here. They want a foothold in there. And again, it has little to do with military strategy. It has a lot more to do with the fact that they simply want to take what's their way they think is theirs. And this is an extension of the show that we did, I guess, a couple of weeks ago now, when the United States issued their proclamation, the kind of a revised edition of the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump version of this, which basically said that we're the United States of America. We have the legal right to take whatever we want from whomever we want, anytime we want, in the interest of our national security. And that's essentially what he was saying. I mean, there's a lot more words to the stuff that they released, but that's the message that was coming out of this. And it's pretty scary for Canada, for Greenland, certainly, and Denmark, of course, who are tied together, but for other nations as well. And it's the sort of thing that I think you can't just say, well, come on, that's just Trump being Trump. We don't know how far this is going to go. And we know that if Putin isn't necessarily coaching him on this, he's certainly encouraging him to say, hey, look, I'm doing it. Why can't you do it too? Take what you want. Who's going to stop you? And that's the question I think we need to be asking ourselves. Who's going to stop this? It's interesting and I think noteworthy here. And I want to bear this out because we did talk about this months ago when it was just, Donald Trump being silly and talking about taking over Greenland. It's a protectorate, of course, of Denmark. Denmark is a NATO country. And now I know that Article 5, of course, of the NATO Charter is an attack on one is attack on all, and they will respond in kind. Now, as we've talked about, the only time in the history of NATO that act has actually been acted upon was after 9/11, where all the NATO nations, including Canada and Denmark, by the way, rushed to the aid and assistance of the United States to fight terror and to fight Osama bin Laden. And, varying countries in varying degrees made contributions to that. So they did respond. Now, it's not happened since, which, by the way, is just a quick aside, one of the reasons why Zelensky wants Ukraine to be part of NATO because of the threat from Russia. And one of the reasons why Putin never wants to see Ukraine in NATO. But Denmark's already there. They're a member of NATO, of the alliance. So what happens? What happens if a NATO country starts to invade or inflict punishment on another NATO country? Do the other countries respond? I'm not necessarily talking about military conflict here, and there may not necessarily be American troops that are landing in Greenland, but they already know, because accusations have been made, that there are American sources and American agents, shall we say, that are already in Greenland trying to undermine government actions there to try to cause discontent. And that's a pretty frightening situation here. And again, this is something that's going to have to be brought up in international courts, I suppose. But they're already talking about this right now. Danish Defense Intelligence Services said in the annual report that the U.S. is using economic power to assert its will and threaten military force against friend and foe alike, and that includes Denmark. So what's NATO going to do about it? What's the G7 going to do about it when they see actions like this? I mean, there have been responses, of course. Ursula von der Leyen, who's the president of the EU, the Executive Commission, said, look, we're going to stand together. We'll be behind Denmark and Greenland all the way through. Well, those are words. And what worries me and what should worry all of us is at what point are those words going to have to translate into some sort of an action? Because words don't stop Donald Trump. Nothing ever has caused Trump to say, whoop, sorry, I overstepped there. Let's just back off on this. In his mind, he's never wrong. And in his mind, he's never made a mistake. And he's emboldened now by what's going on and what's happening here, and which is one of the reasons why he brought it up. And the whole purpose of this announcement, even though he wanted to talk about building battleships, was he's appointed a special envoy to look after this stuff. And this guy is actually just another Trump sycophant. He's Jeff Landry, who's the Louisiana governor in a very, very MAGA state, of course, and says that he wants to be part of this whole program. As a matter of fact, Landry has jumped right into this with both feet, suggesting that he wants to be one of the guys who's going to lead the charge to make Greenland part of the United States. You can't say things like that. I mean, how overt can you be? Not saying, hey, we want to build stronger alliances or increase our military partnerships with them. No, he's just simply saying they want to be part of the United States. They want the United States, that is, wants them to be part of their great country. I guess they're going to be the 51st state. But it's noteworthy that that's the mindset that these guys have right now. And somebody's going to have to do something about it. Now, I know that you have to treat Trump with kid gloves, and you can't go face to face with him. And I agree with that strategy, by the way. I mean, we've talked about that with Prime Minister Carney, but other world leaders and other NATO leaders and G7 leaders, from Macron to Kammer and so many others, have suggested that, you can't just get in that guy's face and say, hey, what are you going to, stop right now? That's not a strategy that seems to work with Trump, but something's going to have to be done. And as we look forward to what's going to be happening in 2026, this is a story that's going to have to be dealt with one way or another. And it's not going to be pretty. Invariably when this stuff happens, it's going to go on and on and on. And at some point, somebody's going to have to say no more. Now, I know, obviously, the Danish government would like that to happen today because they don't want to see this huge U.S. influence in Greenland. I mean, to put the shoe on the other foot for just a second, we mentioned, for instance, that Puerto Rico is a United States protectorate, okay? What would happen if, next week China moved into Puerto Rico and said, we're worried about our national security and the threat from the United States. We're going to take over Puerto Rico so that we can improve our strategic positions in case we have some sort of a conflict with the United States, whatever the justification might be. The fact of the matter is if Trump thinks he can do it anywhere in the world, what's to stop China, or certainly Russia's already doing this, from doing the exact same thing and saying, we're going to lay claim to that. And we in Canada need to be paying attention to this, for the simple reason that if this happens in Greenland, if he gets away with this, and if nobody stands up and says, don't do that or stop right now, what's to have him stop from doing what he wants to do here in Canada? Now, we've talked about, there's no way that you're going to see Canadian and troops and American troops in some sort of a conflict about this. But mineral rights and money and lust for power are what drives Donald Trump. And he's looking at this right now and say there's nobody in Washington who's going to do this and stop him. There's nobody in the Congress. He doesn't pay attention to the Congress or the Senate anyway. I mean, they're totally useless, have no power at all in the U.S. government system anymore. They've acquiesced any power that the Constitution has given them, and basically just they've knelt to Trump and said, do whatever you want, kind sir, and please, don't hurt us. It's really sad to see the way that American politics has devolved in the last 12 months since he's taken office. But we in Canada need to be paying attention to this. And we've talked about, the trade deals and what's going to be happening with the negotiations for CUSMA and everything. And that's right. That's important stuff, certainly. But we do have to talk about sovereignty. And I think just to remind ourselves, because it has been almost a year now since Trump took office, January, of course, of this year, that one of the things that really got our backs up in the first place, that really started the elbows up movement, and I think a groundswell of national pride, which I think is one of the great stories of 2025, that Canada just said, we're Canada, back off. We've got a lot to be proud of here. The Mike Myers elbows up on Saturday Night Live and Carney using that, and many other people. I've got the elbows up baseball cap here someplace that I wore for quite some time and still do, by the way, proudly. But one of the things that I think started that whole thing, and I think really kind of sparked that national pride, was the talk about making Canada the 51st state. And we laughed when he first heard it. That's Trump. What a joker. But all of a sudden we thought, hey, wait a second, he's serious. And we got our backs up about this. Well, I guess the message here is maybe we should get our backs up again and start being proactive on this as opposed to reactive. I mean, the people in NATO are going to have to sit down with or without Trump and have a discussion about just how you're going to treat this guy. It's one thing for him to say, okay, I don't want to really be a player. I don't want to be the driving force behind NATO anymore. We want everybody else to pay their fair share when it comes to NATO defenses, et cetera, and Canada stepped up and other nations have too. That's one thing. But when you've got a bully, it's not just that they want to back off and say we don't want to be the lead dog anymore, but when all of a sudden that lead dog starts turning on the other members of the pack, you got to do something about it before there's nobody left in the pack. And that's, I know, a rather dark and ominous message, but it's a reality I think that we need to talk about here and go into this with our eyes wide open, that if we truly believe in our sovereignty, and I know we do in this country, and I know that the Danes believe in their sovereignty. All NATO nations believe in their sovereignty. That's one of I think, the major tenets of that organization. You got to be ready to defend it against not just the enemy from without. We think of the Russias and the Chinas and the Iranians and the North Koreans, and those are all legitimate foes at this stage. And I don't know that 5 years ago anybody would have thought, well, the biggest threat is going to come from south of the border. But that's a reality as we go into a brand new year that we had better face. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks, as always, for being with us. If you're on YouTube, please hit that notification bell and pass the word on to others. And thank you to everybody for their subscriptions, too. As we've talked about many times on the podcast, your support through subscriptions really helps us to continue the work that we're doing so we can bring you these stories and inform you and start a dialogue, an informed dialogue about what's happening and how we as Canadians can benefit or how we should be reacting to some of these stories. And we really do appreciate your support. Just as a quick aside, by the way, as we're heading toward the end of the year, we're going to do probably next week a kind of a year in review and talk about some of the top stories. And I think, and get some input for you on that as well. But we'll give you more details on that in the days ahead. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to Madeline Kelly for the production values for today, as per usual. Until next time, I'm Bill Kelly. Stay in touch and stay informed.
Bill Kelly Podcast brought to you by Wizen's Law, personal injury lawyers. Listen, you didn't choose to get injured, but you can choose the right lawyer. Wizen's Law, 905-522-1102 or wizenslaw.com.